GCSE PE exam paper, paper 2. This is health and performance. It's from Edexcel exam board and it covers the 2016 GCSE PE specification, so it's the new exam content. Start with the multiple choice. Question 1A. Which one of the following activities is most likely to reduce the risk of osteoporosis in the legs? So osteoporosis, we know, we've studied that it is a condition where you have very weak bones, which is caused by not getting enough exercise, and in particular weight-bearing exercise. So we need to look out for which one of these is perhaps the most weight-bearing. Swimming certainly is not weight-bearing, so it's probably the least. Cycling and rowing would do a little bit of weight-bearing, but it's not so much impact with the ground, whereas aerobics is very much on your feet, weight-bearing, impact training, and therefore that would be helping the bones to get strong and help to prevent osteoporosis. So the correct answer would be A. Question B. Which one of the following is an example of a sedentary lifestyle? Sedentary lifestyle is one where you don't get to move around a lot. Perhaps you're in an office job where there's not a lot of movement, or you're the type of person that doesn't want to do a lot of exercise and sits around watching TV, not exercising on a regular basis. Question C. Which one of the following would be classified as a high organisation skill? Okay, before we look at the options here, we need to think about our skill classification. So we had 3 skill classifications we needed to remember, 3 continuums. So the first one was closed and open skills. And a closed skill would be something that's not got variables from outside, for example, archery, that's not affected by defenders. An open skill would be dribbling a football down the wing, going past defenders, which could be different each time. We also have another continuum, which is basic skills and complex skills. So a basic skill would be something like running, and it's easy to do, has very few subroutines. And a complex skill would be a somersault in trampolining, or highboard diving, where you've got to combine several basic skills together with lots of subroutines. The continuum that relates to this question would be low organisation skills and high organisation skills. Now, in this one, we have low organisation skills that can easily be broken down into separate parts. So for example, when you do swimming, you could just work on your legs using a float for your arms, and then vice versa, you could put the float on your legs and just work on your arm technique. Whereas in golf, you can't really break down the golf swing into separate parts too easily, so it was considered to be a high organisation skill. Question D. Which one of the following types of practice is described as a practice that occurs without rests between trials? So we've got distributed, fixed, massed, variable. Distributed practice is one where we do a little bit of a practice, then the coach stops the practice to give some feedback, so it would certainly have rests. A fixed practice is one where we practice the same skill over without any variables. It's, for example, practicing the basketball free throw over and over again. Massed practice is a practice that takes place over a longer time period, and we keep going until we get tired with no rests. And so it's good for practicing the skills whilst the body's fatigued. And a variable practice is one where it changes all the time. So perhaps there's different defenders, different variables, so very much for open skills. So the one that would be practiced without rests, and the most likely answer here would be the massed practice, as we know that this is keep doing the practice even when you're tired and there's no rests between the trials. Question E. For this question, we've got to look at the graph and answer the questions following. So using figure 1, here's figure 1, Identify the sports with the highest participation rate in 2013 to 14. So this question, you don't have to have any knowledge of GCSE PE to be able to answer it. All you need to do is look at the graph and say what the graph's telling you. Clearly here the highest, around 180 in thousands, would be rugby union, because we can see that from the key here. So identify the sport with the highest participation rate in 2013-14. It's clearly on the graph here, rugby union, simple as that. F. Using figure 1, identify the sport with the greatest increase in participation rate from 2009 to 2013. Let's go back to the graph. So we've got to decide which one of these sports increased the most from 2009 to 2013. So the correct answer for the greatest increase from 2009 to 2013 would be boxing. As you can see, it goes up the most. So the correct answer for question F is boxing. Question 2. Complete the following statements about the benefits of regular participation in physical activity. Participation in physical activity can provide social health benefits, for example, making Okay, keep it simple. It's a social health benefit we're looking for, so making friends is good enough to win the mark on that answer. An increase in self-esteem, however, is an example of a emotional health benefit. This comes into categorizing health into 3 areas. So we have the social benefits, we have the emotional benefits, and we have the physical benefits. Question 3. Figures 2A and 2B show childhood obesity trends for boys and girls from 1994 to 2014. So here we've got 2 graphs that showing the obesity levels, the years along the bottom, and here we have 11 to 15-year-olds, 6 to 10-year-olds, 2 to 5-year-olds. Same for girls at the bottom here, so 11 to 15-year-olds, 6 to 10-year-olds, and 2 to 5-year-olds. And just showing you if obesity is either increased or decreased over the years. The question states, analyse the data in 2A and 2B to determine the changing patterns in obesity levels from 94 to 2014. And we've got to base this on age and gender. Now, the question has asked us to analyse. Now, when you have a question that says analyse, what you want to do is look at the 2 graphs, or look at the information provided, and state details from those graphs. So just give 2 facts about those graphs that are perhaps quite obvious, but we're analysing the graphs. So we've got to give 2 bits of information from the graphs because the question's worth 2 marks. So this is how to answer the question. Younger children aged 2 to 5 years have the lowest obesity rates. Obesity rates generally rise over time for each age group. We can see younger children here have the lowest obesity rates, 2 to 5-year-olds. Same on the girls, 2 to 5-year-olds have the lowest. And we can also see on both graphs that generally there is a trend increasing with all of the age groups. So that's something we can analyse from the graph. Both genders show an increase in obesity levels from 1994 to 2014. There is a drop in obesity levels for boys aged 6 to 10 from 2009. Both genders are increasing their obesity levels for all age groups here So boys and girls from 1994 to 2014 both have increased. There's an upward shift. And the other fact that I've analysed from the graphs is that the boys aged 6 to 10, you can see that actually comes down since 2009. And there's other facts that you could have stated from the graphs, but that was just enough to get 2 marks using analysis of the graphs. Part B asks us, using the data in figure 2a, predict the most likely trend in obesity levels for 11 to 15-year-old boys in 2015. So let's have another look at the graph. So the graph for boys, and we're looking at 11 to 15-year-olds, so it goes from 94 to 99, it's gone up. 2004, it's gone up again. 2009, it's stayed the same, and 2014, it's risen. We need to know what's the trend like to be in the future for next year. Well, I'd say it's most likely to go up because it's generally gone up from 1994. So the most likely thing that's going to happen to obesity levels, unfortunately, is that they will go up. So a trend means, is it going to go down? Is it going to stay the same, or is it going to go up? So we can say the trend will most likely increase. We could actually get the mark just for writing it will increase, but I'm just making it clear that the trend means that it will increase. Question 4. Regular participation in physical activity such as aerobic exercise could reduce the risk of obesity and osteoporosis. Explain how 2 other risks to long-term health can be reduced through regular participation in aerobic exercise. So this question we've got to explain. So we need to make a point, explain it by saying this is because, and then we could say therefore and give the benefit. So for explain questions, always make a point and develop that answer. This one's worth 3 marks. So we get 1 mark for making a point and 2 marks for our explanation of that point. We've got to be clear that this has asked us for 2 other risks to long-term health. So we cannot use obesity and osteoporosis. We've got to think of 2 different ones. So we're going to start with coronary heart disease. Aerobic exercise can reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. That's made our point. And now the explanation. This is because it will clear the arteries and reduce cholesterol. Therefore, the blood pressure will be lowered. Aerobic exercise will reduce the risk of getting depression. This is because exercise will release endorphins and serotonin. Therefore, we will get the feel-good factor and raise our self-esteem. Question 5. Smoking is a lifestyle choice. Explain one way that smoking can impact negatively on health and well-being. This question's asked us to explain, so we're going to need to make a point and then explain that point and develop it to say therefore what the consequence of that point would be to get all 3 marks for this question. So smoking as a lifestyle choice, it's very important to remember the damages that smoking can cause to the body, and the things we need to remember for GCSE are that smoking can cause something called emphysema. Another one it can cause is something called bronchitis. And obviously smoking can cause lung cancer. So as long as we take one of these terms, then say what it means and why it damages the body negatively on health and well-being, then we should be able to get all 3 marks for this question. So let's do a developed statement for emphysema. Smoking can cause emphysema. That's the point made. We're now going to explain the point. This means that the alveoli become damaged. And now we're going to develop the point. Therefore, the gaseous exchange can't take place efficiently, which is bad for health and well-being. So point, explain, therefore, 3 marks for an explain question here. Question 6. Sports skills can be classified as open or closed skills. Explain how a coach would vary a training session when coaching open and closed skills. So the question's asked us to explain, and it's worth 3 marks. So we're going to need to give a point, we're going to need to explain the point, and we're going to need to give a therefore or develop the point to get all 3 of those marks. We're talking about open skills and closed skills. So closed skills is something with not lots of variables, and it's the same every time. For example, 10-pin bowling, it's always the same every time. It's not affected by defenders or the wind. And open skills are quite the opposite. They can be affected by the defenders. They can be affected by bobbles on the pitch, the wind blowing in different directions. And it's always something slightly different depending on where the defenders are and where the ball is on the pitch. Explain how a coach would vary the training session. So first of all, let's make a point. Okay, so we make a point. Closed skills need to be practiced without lots of variables. This could be done using a fixed practice. Therefore, the skills can be focused on to improve the confidence for the pressure of a match. So here we have point, explain, and benefit. So 3 marks. We could have answered this question in the opposite way by talking about open skills and still equally got the marks. So we could have said that open skills need to be practiced with lots of variables. This could be done using a variable practice, and therefore they can practice with the changing variables that they would expect to find in their match. Question 7. Extrinsic and intrinsic feedback are used when performing in sport. Assess the relative importance of each of these types of feedback to a group of people who have just started to learn to swim. So for this question, we've got to assess the relative importance. We've got to say whether or not we think it's very important or not very important. That's what this term relative importance means, that we're basically deciding if it is or it isn't the case. And we really need to understand what is meant by extrinsic and intrinsic feedback in order to answer this question. So extrinsic feedback is feedback you get from your coach, external to you. So you do a performance and then your coach will tell you whether or not it was good or bad. And intrinsic feedback is very much the feeling you get from within, the kinesthetic feeling that takes place, and you can understand whether or not you did it well from how it felt. So with these being a group of people who have only just started to learn to swim, they perhaps wouldn't have that feeling of what it is to have a good swim stroke. They would need quite a lot of instruction from their coach. So let's go on to answer the question. First, we've got to talk about extrinsic feedback, and then we've got to talk about intrinsic feedback. Extrinsic feedback. They would need a lot of extrinsic feedback. This is because they will need instructions from the coach of how to swim. This will give them the basic techniques which they can try to improve. Intrinsic feedback. They will not use as much intrinsic feedback. This is because they are beginners and do not know yet how the skills should be done. Therefore, they can't rely on intrinsic feedback to swim effectively. Question 8. During a football match, a footballer may display gamesmanship or sportsmanship. Describe the difference between gamesmanship and sportsmanship. This question's asked us to describe, so we're not looking for examples. We just got to basically give the definition of gamesmanship and sportsmanship to get each of the 2 marks. Gamesmanship is where a player tries to bend the rules to gain an advantage. Sportsmanship is where a player is completely fair and plays by the rules. An example could be if it did say explain that gamesmanship, a player may stand in front of the ball when the other team's trying to take a free kick to slow the game down, and just sort of walk slowly in front of the ball. Sportsmanship, an example of that may be where you kick the ball off and you actually own up and say, oh, it came off of my foot, therefore it should be a throw into the other team. So you're being as fair as you possibly can and sticking to the rules. Gamesmanship, you probably wouldn't own up to that. Assess the importance of elite performers demonstrating sportsmanship in high-profile sports such as football. It is important for top-level footballers to have good sportsmanship. This is because they are role models. Therefore, many young players will copy their behaviour, so they should set a good example. Question 9. In 2013-14, it was reported that 58% of adults do not play sport. 2 factors that can influence participation rates are socioeconomic group and ethnicity. State 2 other, so we can't have these 2, personal factors that can influence participation rates. For this question, we just need to state, and we need to give one-word answers when we're talking about a state question. And you need to understand the factors. I've taught my class an acronym to remember this, and this would be GAST. So here we have the personal factors which can either influence us to play sport or restrict us from playing certain sports and activities. So we've got G for gender, we've got A for age, we've got S for socioeconomic, we've got E for ethnicity, and D for disability. So if you were to put gender and age, you would have 2 other personal factors that could influence participation rates other than socioeconomic and ethnicity. Equally, you could put disability into one of these 2 spaces to get the mark. So part B asks us to explain 2 reasons why an individual's socioeconomic group could influence their participation in sport. The first part we need to be talking about, so socioeconomic, we need to be talking about how much money a person earns, and therefore it might restrict them from doing certain sports. So if you earn a low income, that's the point made there. And now to explain the point, you may not be able to do expensive sports such as skiing. And the second part of the mark, I'm not sure I entirely agree with the mark scheme here. However, the marks get given for the amount of time that could be affected by a person's socioeconomic group. So you could have a lack. So the point would be that there's a lack of time, meaning that you can't take part in lots of sports. I actually expected that the mark scheme was going to say something to do with class. So we had something here to do with low income, meaning you can't do expensive sports such as skiing. And I thought it might have something to do with, for example, the upper class. So the upper class are more likely to take part in sports such as polo than the working class, who are more likely to take part in sports such as football. Question 10. According to research, some sports have higher participation rates than others. Explain 2 ways in which the media can help to increase participation in sport. This question's worth 4 marks and there's 2 parts to it. So each point that you make is worth 2 marks. You get 1 mark for stating a point that the media can increase the participation, and another mark for explaining that point. So we need 2 separate points and 2 separate explanations. So the first point, media increases the profile of a sport by giving it lots of coverage and then explaining and developing that point to get both marks. Therefore, lots of people watch it and feel encouraged to go and play it for themselves. And the second thing that the media will do, okay, so the second point, media will give money to a sport, for example, from TV rights and various media marketing deals. Therefore, this money can be spent on more facilities and be put back into the game to increase participation. Question 11. Assess the positive and negative impact on an under-16 school rugby team accepting sponsorship from a company that produces alcohol. So we need to, again, make a point and develop our point to get all of the marks of the questions. Questions worth 6 marks. We need to split that into a developed statement here for positive and a developed statement here for negative. Let's start with the positive. The under-16 school rugby team is now going to get a sponsor from an alcohol company. Well, it's not ideal. However, there are some positives. So let's have a look at that. So the positive, let's make a point and develop it. The alcohol company will give money to the team from their sponsorship. This can be spent on better equipment. This will encourage the players and lead to better performances. So yeah, that is a positive from having a sponsorship from an alcohol company. Now on to the negative. So the negative for the alcohol company sponsorship would be that the alcohol company sponsoring the team could encourage an unhealthy lifestyle. This is because the team are under 16 and shouldn't be drinking. They may choose to drink alcohol and damage their liver and organs. So here we've made a point and developed it to gain all of the marks of the questions. Question 12. Evaluate the need for an endurance athlete to maintain a balanced diet. This is a 9-mark question at the end of the paper. In order to get all 9 marks, we're going to need to use developed statements. That being making a point, explaining our point, giving examples and the benefit or consequence. So point, explain, example, benefit. We're going to need to repeat this, making sure that we're always answering the information for the question. And we're also going to need to give a good conclusion, giving our own opinion, summarising the main points and perhaps providing a balance to the argument. And all the time making sure that we are answering the question to the point where if we were to read through the answer, we could actually predict what the question in fact said. So let's have a go at this 9-mark question. Evaluate the need for an endurance athlete to maintain a balanced diet. It will be very important for an endurance athlete to maintain a balanced diet. This means to eat the appropriate proportions of macro and micronutrients, for example, the correct levels of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and vitamins. Therefore, They will maintain a good body weight which is suitable for long distance training. They will need to eat a large amount of carbohydrates. This is because they are needed for energy. This will help them to do long and effective training sessions. They may also benefit from increasing their protein intake. This should be done after tough training sessions by eating meat or drinking milk. This will allow the muscles to recover and grow stronger, ready for the next training session. Now the conclusion. Overall, the balance of the diet will be extremely important as it will maintain the energy levels for endurance training. It will also keep the athlete in good health with less chance of illness. However, as an endurance athlete, the balance of nutrients will have to be changed at times. This may be for carbohydrate loading before a big competition race or by taking in more protein to aid recovery. The balanced diet will therefore change in relation to their training and race schedule.